I've been working on something that I'm calling the authority engine. And it's taking one asset and building an entire ecosystem out of that. And we saw that a little bit with the stage book. You're doing one thing and it's becoming all this other stuff, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that. Before we do, I have a confession to make. I worked in Hollywood for 15 years. I was a screenwriter and an actor, and I worked in development. And one of the accusations leveled against me was that I was too much of a Boy Scout. And a while ago, I was going through some old photo albums, and it's true. I've always been a Boy Scout as long as I can remember. So Scout's Honor today, I'm going to break some common myths around creating a book and what we can actually do with books. More importantly, I want to shift your viewpoint on what you actually think that a book even is. Because I think there's kind of this locked-in belief of what a book has to be this thing, and so there's all this pressure that we put on ourselves, and that's the reason why people will take 3 years. But we're going to break that a little bit. So my background, I worked in Hollywood for 15 years as a screenwriter and development for a guy by the name of Jonathan Crane. Jonathan Crane was Travolta's manager, so some of the movies that he did, Phenomenon, Michael, Look Who's Talking, John Travolta, which, by the way, Look Who's Talking remains one of the most profitable movies of all time. He made it for $7 million. It made 500 and something. I know they talk about these big movies, but this was the one in terms of sheer profit. John married to Sally Kellerman. Sally was the original Hot Lips Houlihan in the film MASH in the 70s or 80s. She's one of the biggest movie stars in the world. And she taught me two great things. My book writing process came from her, and I'll get to that in a second. The other thing that I learned from being around her and her friends, and obviously with the people Jonathan did, is that there's two types of fame. There's the Hollywood fame, which really sucks because you have no privacy. You're getting stalked by paparazzi and nowadays like really creepy people. And you also have people that are actively cheering you to fail. And when you fail, they celebrate. And there's some people that will hunt ways to try to purposely take someone down. Even Mel Gibson mentioned this years ago. He said the thing that's crazy with Hollywood is that you'll do something and someone will just completely destroy your career, and it's usually someone that you helped. That's Hollywood, right? So there's a lot of drawbacks to it, but I found out that there's something that I like to call, which is micro-celebrity. What is micro-celebrity? Micro-celebrity is that you're famous only in your niche. So I used to do stand-up comedy when I was in LA. My comedy coach made $300,000 a year as a stand-up comedian, which is unheard of, right? And he did it because he treated comedy like a business. Shocking, I know. And I told him he needed to write a book called How to Be the Richest Comedian No One's Ever Heard of. With entrepreneurs, it's sort of the same thing. How to be the richest person that no one's ever heard of. Right? Russell Brunson is a good example. Everybody in the marketing world knows who he is. You go out on the street and like, Russell Brunson. People are like, who's Russell Brunson? And it's that way in Oliver, and every industry has their guys. So what's great about it is you still get red carpet treatment. You can command higher fees because you have more perceived authority. You also have more lucrative opportunities because more doors are open to you. And then finally, you can exist in public while remaining practically, for all intents and purposes, visible. It's like the ultimate win-win. A little bit about me. Like I said, I was a Hollywood screenwriter. I've authored 19 books. I actually wrote my first book when I was 12. It was a trilogy called Travis the Tricky Tiger. Unfortunately, those manuscripts were lost, but I ended up becoming a paid journalist when I was 16. I was on the payroll of a paper. I was the youngest journalist they had in 128 years. And so I went to Hollywood. I wanted to be an actor, and I realized if I want to have control over my career, the best way to do that is through writing. Apparently my writing was better than my acting because I got hired by Jonathan. With Jonathan, we worked for him for 15 years, and we had just closed a slate, $250 million fund to make a slate of films. It was in escrow, the contract was signed. Jonathan had a heart attack. And so all this work we'd put into this thing suddenly came to an end. The investor was like, well, I was investing in the guy who had 50 movies, not the company. And so I got into this point in my career where I was like, do I want to go somewhere else and start over and be low in the totem pole? And I took some time off, and I actually wasn't super smart with my money, so I went classic story where I got down to $42.18 in my bank account, and I went for a walk to the beach. Now this is the irony to me, that I was depressed because I was almost broke, but I was living within walking distance of the beach. So what do I do when you're depressed? I walk to the beach, and I'm sitting on the beach, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with my life? And I took the advice of Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman tells this story where when he was younger, his dad was saying, listen, son, This is how you get through life. There's the things that you love to do, and there's the things that you're really good at. So you need to build a career in the things that you're good at, because you'll never not have employment. And then you do the things that you love on the side. And then if you're lucky, someday the two of those things may come together. And Hugh Jackman used to talk about, I'm the luckiest man in the world because I get paid to do what I love. And so I was thinking about that, sitting on that beach going, well, what am I really good at? Okay, I'm really good at writing. Screenwriting it's a hit or miss thing. I'm not going to make a living doing that. And I had discovered direct response copywriting earlier. And so I decided, let me give this copywriting thing a chance. It just so happened that John Benson, the inventor of the video sales letter, lived in Malibu. We met. You're a Hollywood guy, you're learning copy, I do videos, this is great. I ended up going and working with John Benson, and that kind of launched my career. So some of the people that I've had a chance to work with or around or for, you know, and I'm not saying that to brag, but what that did allow me to see was to be able to get behind the scenes and behind the curtain of some of the biggest marketing campaigns in the world that we're aware of, right? It gave me a unique perspective. The challenge with all that is that my copy was making tens of $millions for my clients, and when I'd launch one of my products, it would flop. I had one where I wrote, build a big funnel for my wife, and I did the whole thing, and she's not really sure. She's like, I'm just going with it. We launch it, and it flops. And I sat there and was like, well, am I a failure as a copywriter or a failure as a husband or both? Right? That was my mindset. Why isn't it working? So I started looking at all my clients going, what the heck? What are they doing? And I came up with this concept called micro-celebrity, which is they had this one core asset that they built everything around. And when I finally figured that out and started being a little more intentional in my books, things changed. I ended up being on the news, invited on some big stages, randomly ended up on Ellen, and one of my books ended up getting me as a guest expert on the History Channel show called The Icons That Made America. I'm going to tell that story in a minute. Today I live in Las Vegas with my wife Michaela and our two girls, Freya and Diana. My intention for today is to talk a little bit about some of those strategies, and I said more importantly I want to kind of shift our thinking on what is a book and what can it be. So the first thing I like to talk about is overnight authority. And the reason I say that is you already have a book, most likely finished, and it's sitting there and you don't even realize it. So, but to get at that, we have to first destroy the myth, which is to write a book, it's really hard, it takes a long time, it takes us years, I gotta grind it out, I gotta sit in front of the computer and do it. I get it. My first book took me a little over 2 years to write. My second book was 19 months. Then I had an experience with Sally that I'll share in a minute that changed everything. But the reality is, one well-crafted book and one well-crafted idea, you can actually get your book done in hours. I'm going to show you in today's world, most of you probably already have your first book finished. So before we do that, let's talk about what the heck is a book anyway. What's the definition of a book? To me, a definition of a book is a collection of valuable or useful information organized in a logical way. So if that's the case, then that means stage book. How about a podcast? Let me show you some of my books here. I don't know how any of you guys seen Russell talk about this? So I made this for Russell. Russell didn't know, but I took his Marketing in the Car podcast and I turned it into a book. So Russell has this book. It goes to all of his mastermind guys. Do you know how much work this took Russell? Nothing. He just had to open up the box when I sent it to him. Right? That's how easy that is. But what else is a book? Look at this book right here. Look at this tiny little thing. You know what? I made this book to prove a point to someone, and they said, you can't turn anything into a book. This was my master's thesis. Did it in like 3 days. Published this book, didn't give it a second thought, didn't put any marketing into it. 8 years later, somebody on the History Channel comes across this book and is like, hey, we're doing this show. You're the only guy with a book on Stallone's writing. Can you come to LA? That opportunity would have not happened if I wouldn't have made this little book. This book right here, you're like, I need to have a lot of experience. I need to have, I hear this all the time on people on LinkedIn. I don't have enough room in my career yet to talk about a book. Maybe when I hit the end of my career, then I can do it. I did an experiment on myself. For 30 days, I turned off all my screens. No cell phone, no TV, no gadget, nothing. I had a landline phone. That's how I lived. And then I did journals because I thought I was going to go crazy and lose my mind. And I thought when they find me 3 weeks from now wandering naked down the street and they'll come by my journals and be like, oh my God, I turned off his cell phone. No wonder he's crazy. This was from a 30-day experiment turned into a whole book. Do you need experience to write a book? 30 days of me talking about it. What we're playing around with right now, this is my wife's book. I came up with this concept called guide. This is my book, Bestseller by Design. I got a copy of this for everybody, by the way. But I broke it down into the simple steps. Why is it called a pocket guide? Look at the size. It just goes right there. This is about 100 pages, but it feels okay. And I'll pass, if you guys want to see these, you can pass these around if you want. One of the biggest myths in the publishing industry that really kind of bothers me is that you got to have a platform. You got to have the audience and the thing and this and that, and then you make the book. That's backwards. The book should become the platform, or even more importantly, in today, if you have a system and a process that you can go through to get a book out quickly, you should just publish a book to publish a book. I have 19 books. How did I do that? Because I created a framework around it. Half of my books I have had 30 days unplugged. How are you going to monetize that? I don't know. I just put it out there in the world. Stallone, no way I can monetize that book. Ended up creating an opportunity. So my belief is the more that you can publish and the more that you can get out there, that book is out into the world and it's going to open up doorways and opportunities for you that you necessarily wouldn't have, right? So have I made a lot of money from the Stallone book? No. $230,000 worth of free airtime in the History Channel. Was it worth it to take the time to do it? So here was the thing that made the shift for me. And a couple of other things, content, video, and articles, webinars. Frank Kern's secret. He has 4 books. What did he do? If any of you have been on a Frank Kern webinar, he does like 3-hour webinars. He wrote the webinar, did the webinar, transcribed the webinar, turned it into a book, didn't even edit it, and then that's his book funnel. Now he drives people to the webinar funnel, or his book, that sells some videos, that does the thing, and then at the end, what does he do? He invites them to the webinar. Of what? The book! I call that circular marketing. We're starting with one phrase, so like stage book. You're creating the presentation, becomes the workshop, that becomes the book. You launch the book, it becomes the funnel, and the funnel does what? Sells then, right? Frank's doing the same thing. Webinar, it becomes a book, launches the book, it sells some videos. It's circular marketing. What really shifted for me was one day when I was working, I'm going down the hallway in Jonathan's office, and I go by Sally's room, and she's inside, and she's laughing hysterically and dancing around. And I'm just like, what's going on here, Sally? This is a good old time in here. She's like, I'm working on my book. My brain froze up a little bit because I sat there and went, wait a minute. When I worked on my book, there was no laughing. There was no dancing around. Like, it was late night, soul-crushing self-doubt. And I was like, what do you mean you're working on your book? And then it occurred to me that she was approached writing a book like an actress, not a writer. And I was young enough at that point in time it hadn't occurred to me that maybe there was more than one way to go about doing something. And so I asked her a ton of questions. And I went home and I sat for a day. And there was a book I had been thinking about for a couple of years, and I didn't want to go through the process again. And I applied what she taught me, and I got the draft done in 6 hours. And then I spent 38 hours going through the draft because I'm like, there's no way it can be this easy and can be this fast. And it was. What's the difference? Our brain thinks at about 2,000 words a minute. Most of us type about 50 words a minute. When you sit down to write something, you're going at 50 words a minute, your brain's still going at 2,000 words. That means you got 1,950 words running while you're typing. And how does that show up when you're typing? Is this the way I should do that? Why is I thinking this way? Is my English teacher going to do that? Is that person going to be pissed off? I don't know. Why did I think that I could write this book? You know what? I need to go check my email. Right? That's what takes, my belief is why it's so difficult for people to write books. We talk at about 200 words per minute. And I would say some of us entrepreneurs that have ADHD probably speak at 300 words per minute. So if you just shift what you're doing from, I'm going to sit and type, I'm going to write my book, and you move it into a conversational process, which is what Sally was doing, you're now going at 200 words per minute versus 50. You've already 4x'd your speed, right? And the other thing, which is sort of a weird side effect, is when we're sitting down with friends and we're telling stories, your brain isn't going there going like, am I saying that right? Is the grammar proper? Are they going to judge me for that? You're just telling the story. And so you remove 95% of the resistance and you're going 4 times faster. Now, granted, the trade-off is when you go that fast, it's rough. It's going to be a rough draft. But have you ever looked at the behind the scenes of a Hollywood, like a Marvel movie? Have you seen their rough draft? Like what they're actually filming It's two guys in Halloween costumes, fake fighting in front of a blue screen. It looks ridiculous. That's what they captured on film. But it goes through a whole car wash of polishing. So by the time they're done, you believe these guys are flying around the universe beating the crap out of each other. Your book is the same thing. You move super fast, and then you bring in other people, other experts, to do all the heavy lifting for you. If you look at a book like the film production cycle, there's pre-production, there's production, there's post-production. Now here's the crazy thing about making a movie. That's about a 2-year process. Got about a year, 6 months to a year of pre-production. The actual making of the movie, 3 months. Post-production is about a year and a half. That's the crazy thing. What gets all the sex appeal? The actual making of the movie. And it's the shortest part of the entire process. You with your book, it needs to be the same thing. Plan it, and then you make it, and that should be the shortest part of the process. Then you need to take it to experts, and you need to let them polish it for you so you can get it out the door. Steven Spielberg, he doesn't do the editing, he doesn't do the CGI, he doesn't do the special effects, he doesn't do the music, but when you go to a movie theater, what does it say? A film by Steven Spielberg. So stop thinking of your book as I'm this writer and start thinking I'm the director that needs to guide the people through these steps to get through it quicker. Okay, so once you've got the book done, what do we want to do? I call it the omnipresence formula, which is how do you now take the book and get everywhere? So Steve was saying earlier, we've got to have content. We've got to get it out. I'm a big proponent of, can we do work one time and then expand it? And the answer is yes. With AI now, you don't need to manually create your content every single day. Create your presentation, do the workshop, turn it into a book. You've only really done one thing, which is create the presentation. And now you can take, I went a little faster, you can take the AI tools to break that up into everything. And I don't have it today. If you want to see it, I've got it on my phone. I took one of my books, and we're running it through processes to beta test it right now, where I did actually create an AI clone of myself. And I'm turning it into, my book has now become like 170 30-second videos of me talking about the content from my book. And I showed the videos to my wife, and the first couple, she wasn't sure. So that's how close it is. My wife is even like, it feels a little weird, but I'm not quite. And I've got videos of me just walking down through the park, and it's all AI, right? I'm with Steve in that I feel like our superpower really, as AI moves forward, is to become more authentic and become more human. But if I can use those tools to create small things that are 95% of my essence that allows me to get more reach and visibility, I'll do that. And the other thing, I want to try to change your mind a little bit about what a book can actually even do, and it's what I call the merchandising matrix, or the George Lucas strategy for turning one asset into a lot. Let's think of your book like a blockbuster movie. George Lucas, when he did the first 6 Star Wars films, and whatever that was, a 25-year period, those movies made about $4.7 billion. Not too bad. George Lucas controlled the merchandising for those movies. Any guesses on how much he made in that same period of time with the merchandising? $28 billion. He made 7 times more money with the merchandising than he did with the films themselves. This, in my opinion, is the biggest mistake that most authors make, is that they treat the book as its own asset, and they also treat the publishing of the book as the finish line. And this is my other pet peeve with the publishing industry, even with traditional publishers. They put all this work in it, and the book is published, and it's out in the world, and then they slap you on the shoulder and are like, good job. And then a week later, you're like, they completely abandoned you, and you're sitting there with this thing going, well, what the heck am I going to do with it now? The book is actually just the starting point. If we go back into circular marketing, we can use it, you can use it with all of those things. And this is the other thing. I have a lot of people like, I don't want to publish a book because no one's going to read my book. Well, yes, but if you're a micro-famous, if you're a micro-celebrity in a niche, probably not going to sell millions of copies. And there's, again, I have so many conversations with people off of LinkedIn that, well, my book's got to do this and I got to do that. Well, what are you trying to do with the book? Because the reality is that you don't need to sell a lot of copies of book. You just need to sell strategic copies of that. This book, Bestseller by Design, this is one of my favorite quotes. If you guys remember this guy, Bob Proctor, he said one time, I haven't made a dime from any of my best-selling books, but I've made millions from being a best-selling author. which is true. When you leverage the book and make it a leverage point, there's all this other stuff that you can do with it. So my Goldmine book is one of my favorite. This book, Bestseller by Design, this is maybe sold on Amazon, is maybe sold about 500 copies. Nothing to write home with. My author friends are like, aren't you embarrassed your book is only sold 500 copies on Amazon, because all my marketing for this book takes place off of Amazon, right? And from those opportunities, I've put calls to action, I put QR codes, I'm doing assets. I would say that this book over 8-year period has probably generated $1.5 million because of that, right? And the other one, so if any of you guys know who Ron Lynch is, Ron actually wrote the foreword for this book, and when he was writing it, he's like, it's so funny what you said about your book and not needing to sell a lot. I have a book, I sold 1,100 copies, and he's like, admittedly, about 350 of those copies I bought personally. Over a 15-year period, he's able to trace over $22 million in revenue to the book because of the way it was positioned. So that's it on that. Is there anything specifically you guys have questions on for your stage books where I can maybe help push you through that a little bit? And this is my contact information, because I know everybody's in different phases of what they're doing, but I'm happy to kind of dig into any of that.
Yeah, so thank you first off, that was fantastic. Could you walk us through the process of how you want us to interact with you after we get off stage? One of the questions we get, I'll just say it out, one of the questions we get is, what happens next? Should I start outlining? Should I start table of contents? When am I ready to actually talk with Travis? Just that process is, I think, a lot simpler than a lot of us are thinking.
Yeah, it's way simpler. Again, right, it's really weird with books. We have a tendency to just overthink everything with it because it feels like such a big sort of serious thing. I'm going to put my name on this book and it's going to be out there. And again, my first 2 books, I obsessed over them. So the second book I had a traditional publisher for, and it was also the best lesson where it kind of broke me out of a bad model I had, which was, why did it take 2 years? Well, I probably wrote it in a year, and then I had a year of like finessing. When I got my publishing deal, they gave me a team of editors to go through it, but I really wanted to be the guy of like, I'm going to be the best author they've ever had. And so I hired editors. I probably had 3 editors of my own. They had 3 editors, went through it. I gave it to 20-some friends, beta readers, right, to go through it, mark it up, give me everything. It was like 35 people went through this book. Gets published. I get my box of books. I open it up. First 5 pages, 3 typos. 40-some people went through that. 6 professional editors. And that's when I realized it just needs to be good enough to just go. And what was funny with that book is at the time I got a review on Goodreads, which back then that was really hard to get a review on Goodreads. And it was a 3-star review. And so I get on Goodreads and I'm reading it. It's like, well, I like this and I like this. And it's the thing that every author wants to hear. I'm giving it 3 stars because it's just not very well written. All right, no, I've been found out publicly. 2 weeks later, I get an email that said, hey, your review on Goodreads has changed from 3 stars to 4 stars. What's this about? So I go back in and it's like, over the last 2 weeks, I found myself going back through this book again and again and applying the things that he tells us to do, and I've noticed a noticeable positive change in my life. Wow. So I'm upgrading it from 3 stars to 4. Parentheses, it's still not very well written, though. And I sat with that for a minute, and I said, do I want to be the Pulitzer-winning author that no one ever read my book, or do I want to be the guy that has an okay book that someone just said has positively changed their life? And ever since then, I think that might be one of the reasons why I've got 19 books, because I just go so much more faster, because if I have something that I know is going to help someone, I want to get it out as quickly as possible, and then I can iterate along the way. Bestseller by Design is actually the 3rd version of a book that I had called When a Book is a Goldmine, which contains my process from going from blank page to getting published. But over the years, I just refined my processes and found better and better ways to explain it. So to answer your question, when do we want it? Start talking to me as soon as you've got your speech planned out.
Before the event.
Yeah, before your event. Because we can actually use your speech table of contents, essentially, to start building out your book table of contents. And I can actually help you start doing that before you even speak with it, before you even have the event. So that by the time the event's on stage, 1, you'll have your presentation all ready to go, and there might be some things when we're building the table of contents for your book that we might be able to modify just slightly to actually make it a little bit better. Because doing it the correct way, you can actually have your presentation days almost model your book outline exactly. Right? And Steve said something that almost no one thinks about when they're doing books, which is to include an FAQ. Mine, I'll try to, like when I do a chapter, so I've got 6 steps in my process. I'll try to break it down where I'm like, okay, in step 1, what are all the questions that I get? And I'll try to bake those into my content just so like that you can create the like, this guy feels like he's in my head. Because I know the question, well, what usually happens here is someone will come up with this problem and here's how we address it. That's how I'll do it. Doing a section at the end in the appendix, it's also a frequently asked question. Why is that such a good idea? Because you're addressing the objections before you even get anybody on the phone. And if you're like me, when I get on calls with LinkedIn, it's like 85% of the time I'm getting 90% of the same questions. So now it's to the point where I'm like, did you read my book? No, here, let me send you a copy of my book and then read it and then just get on the phone. So that you can now start having conversations that are just, what's the actual problem versus like, how does this work? Yeah, but come to me as soon as, I can work with you to get your outline done. If you've already done your presentation, let's chat. I can start walking you through the next steps of what it's going to take. And we have a couple of options. Like, if you want to, I can just walk you through how do we now take the presentation and turn it into a book. But I got a team of editors and all that stuff. If you know, like with John Parks, I'm like, just give me the files and we'll just go do it for you. All right, we can probably get everything done in about 4 weeks for the editing and maybe 2 weeks for like all the production stuff. Wow. What are questions? So if you've had your presentation and it's been more than a month and a half already and you're still sitting on it, we could have had it done already. So let's just chat.
Hold on, hey, I got the mic. Just kidding. So again, sorry, how long from the time that we do our event to the time of a ready to print book should we expect? Like, what's that?
Honestly, like being reasonable, if you do your event and we get the transcriptions of everything, like, we could have the book ready to go within 2 months.
2 months, okay.
Yeah, easily. And if it's the more organized it is, the faster we can get that done.
And then that's a print on demand. Is that how we're executing these instead of?
Yeah. So Amazon now is like every distribution center has a giant printer, and so when like next time you order a book where it says it's Amazon Prime and you get the free shipping, when you get the book, so like I ordered this one retail. I think it's in here. Let's see. If you flip to the last page, it actually tells you where it was printed. Of course, this one doesn't have it, but it usually say printed wherever. For me, I'm in Las Vegas, and so all my books, it always says that book was printed usually that morning. This era of we need to have a garage full of books to get a decent price that's long gone. And Amazon, as an author on Amazon, you can order your books at print cost. Book, I think that cost me $287 when I order it. In your publishing platform, you get in there, it says author copies, and it's whatever it costs. And it's super competitive to any local printer. Right? For a while there, people are like, I go to my local printer because I can save money. You save like 50 cents, but you still have to order like 300 copies to be able to do that.
If you've got content already recorded, can you use that? And
Absolutely.
Does it have to be in one book, or can it be strategically put out in
Yeah.
series?
So if you're doing a lot of content, so like you've got 800 podcast episodes, you've got, you've probably got 25 books in a series. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You've already done all of the work, and it's just somebody's got to find it on the. And again, like if we're going to publish a series of 25 books, are all of those going to? Some of them may not even sell a lot, but the thing is guess what's going to happen? They're going to search Steve Larson. What's the first thing that comes up on now and in AI? For me, if you Google search Travis Cody, it's usually my website, my Amazon author profile, and then my LinkedIn, because Amazon's such a huge site. And so a lot of my clients are like, well, why do we want to publish with Amazon? I say because they're such a huge company and get so much traffic, it just boosts you up. And the other thing is, do all my books make money? No. In fact, most of them are just kind of sitting there. But when you search me and you go to Amazon, it's like, Travis has got 15 books to his name. I have 4 that are ghostwritten. But now suddenly, there's always the joke of like, I'm going to the consultant, and who are you going to choose? The guy that's got the book or the guy who doesn't have the book? Well, if you're in an industry where everybody's got a book, now who are you going to choose? The guy who's got 1 book or the guy who's got 4 books? Well, suddenly you're like, okay, he's got 4 books. The reality is most of those 3 extra books weren't any extra effort because you had already done it. You already had a podcast. Right now, I'm using the podcast strategy to create a book. And it's allowing me to actually have better conversations with people I want to talk with. I'm just going out to CEOs and founders and saying, hey, I'm writing a book. Can I interview you for a chapter? And we treat it as a podcast, but then I'm just transcribing that, and I'm doing one thing one time, and it's becoming, and that's all then turning into content that's going on my social. One thing's becoming a book and content and all this other stuff with no additional effort. Now that I know how, now that we got Agentic, now I'm like, oh, I turn this into a bot that does all like 90% of this for me.
And then have you guys figured out like a strategy for, we have the book, and then is there any look at how to tie that in so that it could be like an offer that's already in the funnel, but they can still transact in Amazon,
Yep.
can track it as a sale so that you're getting Amazon credit for a number of sales rather than having us, because like right now, maybe I'm incorrect, but like if I offered the book right now as kind of like on your way out on the shopping cart, by the way, you should buy the book. Do we have a methodology to drive that directly to Amazon so Amazon credits us, or?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just link it to your link and it'll go straight to Amazon. But if it's gonna be part of your funnel, just print out a box of physical copies and fulfill them. Or like Frank Kern, he got to the point where he doesn't really send out physical copies of his book anymore. He like just switched to PDF, and like the sales stayed the same. And he's like, it saves me the hassle of having to do the physical fulfillment. I have both. I have things running off of Amazon, and then I have my Amazon. Again, I just let my Amazon do what it's going to do. And then inside the book, yes. So like if you look at Bestseller by Design, the first thing I have, hey, I got a master class, and then I get in there like, hey, you want to see my cover templates? And there's a thing there, and it's like, hey, you got this, so you want to see that? Right now with QR codes, making it even easier. Beginning, middle, and then at the end, I would just put a QR code of like, hey, go here to get this stuff. Because the thing is, beautiful thing is Amazon, there's a lot of traffic, but Amazon controls all the data, so you never get any of that. So you want to assume that your book is going to be on Amazon and somebody's going to find it there or in the library, and that you need to get them out of there into your ecosystem. So you want to make that as easy as possible. You just create a hook and some sort of offer that really benefits what they're doing with reading. One of the things that we just built now is a lot of people I speak with. This is the average, by the way, on Amazon, LinkedIn, 4,000 conversations. I asked people how long have they been thinking about writing a book. Any guess on what the average time length is? 7 years, which is crazy to me, knowing that you can go from blank page to having a book done in 90 days if you have a process that removes a lot of the stuff. 7 years, that's crazy to me. I was going somewhere with that and totally lost my train of thought. So sorry, I'm going to lose that one.
Yes. And just so everyone knows, like, I think it's psycho to not put your book on Amazon. Absolutely put it on Amazon, but then also have a book funnel also, so you can control the data. But even if it goes off Amazon, there's things to pull back to the ecosystem. I wanted to, and tomorrow I'm going to show how the book funnel has evolved even since we talked last time, because there's a few other ways that we found to really increase sales like crazy. I wanted to ask you though, so when we come to you, and I didn't realize this until you were like, dude, where's this book? And like lovingly yelling at me for like, hey, finish this thing. Do you even want us to have anything written when we come to you?
Don't need to. If you have an idea, and again, if we're going to stage book and you know what your presentation is going to be about, I mean, your process of how you're breaking it down, that's already very naturally fits anyway. That's enough for us to start with. And by the way, the biggest mistake, and one of the reasons I think most people take 3 or 4 years to write a book, is they don't take the time to just map out the outline first. Yeah. So you're sharing somebody earlier spends 3 weeks doing an outline. When I was in Hollywood, I would spend about 40 hours to outline a movie. But once I did that, it would take me about 30 to 40 hours to write the whole script. So I would write a script in a week, and my friends were just like, whoa, how do you do that? And in the fiction world, there's this thing, there's pantsers versus plotters, and there's all this debate, and it's like, plotters are guys that plan everything out, and pantsers, they just write by the seat of their pants, right? And so there's a debate. What shouldn't you do? And there's like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's who you are as a person. And I'm like, well, there's no right or wrong answer, but I'll tell you this. When I was in Hollywood, running a writer's room with 12 writers, the guys that were plotters, or the guys that were pantsers, they all had a dozen or so half-finished scripts, because they would start writing, and then they would get into a hole, and they couldn't figure it out, and then I'll figure it out, come back to it later. The guys that were plotters, you know how many unfinished scripts they had? 0, because they knew exactly what they were writing. I think it is the same with your book. The more clear you can, and again, that's 85% of the hard work is going to be coming up with this. But once you've done that, you can get your draft done. So with my process, I spend probably a month with people working on their outline, so that we know it's a table of contents. So before we ever start, we know what's in every single chapter, what's every question, what's every case study, what's every process. Because when they get there, like last year I had 3 founders that just flew to Vegas, and we met for 2 days, and when they went home, their draft was done. And people's brains just go, look, I don't understand how you get it done so quickly. Because when you got the clarity, it moves all this stuff. You just like, let's just get it done. And like I said, it's rough. The way we speak and the way we write, it's the weirdest thing to me in human language. Like if I ask Steve to like write your origin story down and give me a 3,000 word article, get on stage and tell me that origin story, and we read the two of them, they read different. It's so weird to me. So, but then the process is like it's out of your head. You can stop thinking about it. Now you're moving on, and we just bring in editors who can polish it. And obviously with AI, there's a couple of editing processes that we can even speed up even faster, which totally random note. You probably guys don't ever care to know this, but so Amazon now, when you go to publish, there's a big button that says, did you use AI to generate this manuscript? Right now, it's word of honor. It's not public anywhere. If you click on it, Amazon's not going to show that anywhere. So there's a lot of writers, they're like, I'm going to fool Amazon. No, I didn't use any AI for this. You're not going to outsmart a $1 trillion company. There's actually an Amazon slap that's going to be coming. I don't know if it's this year or next year, but I'm friends with somebody who was a manager with Amazon Publishing for 15 years. And Amazon's just watching to see how many people are saying, no, this was no AI, and they can clearly see that it was written with AI, and they're going to actually, any accounts that have a lot of books that were written with AI that said no, they're going to disable all their accounts. That's coming. Where I'm going with that is, when you click on, there's a little thing that says, what do we consider AI? This is what Amazon's terms of service say. If you outline, if you brainstorm, or if you edit using AI tools, they don't consider that AI-generated content. The process we use, we'll outline and we'll brainstorm, and we'll use AI to help us create a stronger outline. But then we use a spoken conversational process. You get on stage and speak it. Now you're coming from transcripts. The rough draft's already done. Now we can use AI tools to get through a couple of editing processes to speed that up. Amazon does not consider that because AI didn't generate anything. It just cleaned up what you have.
Sorry, I'm hogging the box if anyone else wants it. One of the most challenging aspects I did have is going from the spoken word to the written. That transition there. How do you guys handle that? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's not a full transcription of the books. It reads really weird.
Yeah, it is. Up until about a year ago, we used to just have a series of editors. We would have an editor that their whole job was to just, I call it translate. How do you translate spoken word into the geeky technical term is nonfiction narrative prose? If any of you ever want to know that. If you're ever working with something that's transcription and you're trying to create a post or an article, use that phrase. Hey, I need to take this written word into nonfiction narrative prose, and you'll immediately see that your output ends up way better on the first draft. So it used to be human, 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 and now the translation AI most of the time can do okay. You still got to wrestle with it. AI still does jinky things with this stuff. So especially chat. I don't use chat to do any sort of translation work anymore because chat is learning, right? It's a large language model that's learning. Well, what's it learning on? It's learning on the internet. And I frankly feel like the more it's learned on the internet and the more users have used it, and the more dumb it's become because it's just seen all, like in the last 6 months, the writing quality of chat has just gotten so awful. I use it now for pattern recognition and analytics, and that's about it. But what used to take probably 40 to 50 hours of translating work, we can get down to maybe 5 hours now using the right AI processes. Yeah. In my process, there is always a human editor on the final step. Because my friends have asked me, well, we're getting rid of all the humans. I'm like, no, there is. And because I have one important question, I always ask the human editor on the final phase, read through this and proofread it and do some line editing. And when you're done, I want you to tell me how you felt when you read the book. Where did you get bored? Where were you inspired? Were there places you got sad? Were there places you got confused? Mark those. Because if they're reading it and they got confused, that means I didn't explain something the correct way, or I need to put a story or a case study. AI so far, you can't give it a document and be like, how did this make you feel when you read it? So I don't think we'll ever get to that point. So for me, I'll always have a human as the final stage sort of stopgap.
And then I think you started to ask the question, pre-sell, what's the greatest length of time between starting to pre-sell a book to its actual production is effective? When do you start? When is it good? When is it not good?
Well, Amazon will say that the bigger it depends on what you're going to do to promote it. Like if you've got a good audience and you've got a good social strategy where you can be putting out content a few times a week, I think Amazon now allows you to do a pre-order up to about 6 months out. So what's the advantage of doing that? The advantage, and Ben is really good at this. Ben, he does all of his books, I think about 3 to 4 months pre, because they just hammer trying to get people in there. Because the reason, the way the bestseller lists work for USA Today and New York Times, they have a 7-day aggregate. And so if you can spend 6 months promoting your book to pre-order, and you can get 4,000 or 5,000 people to pre-order the book, all those sales go in that first week. And usually if you can get 5,000 to 6,000 sales in a 7-day period, that's usually enough to trigger a USA Today bestseller. And so that's the advantage if you're going for that. Not that there's a lot of advantage in hitting the bestseller lists anymore, but the one drawback to having the pre-order on Amazon is you've got to have everything in there at least a week. I think it might even be 10 days before it goes live. And if you don't, Amazon will disable that listing. I've had guys that have like, I'm going to pre-order, and they'll do like 2 months, and I'm like, you need more than 2 months because something happens in production. No. And then something happens in production, and they don't get the files in time, and it just turns off the listing. And then you have to relist the book, which is fine. You can relist it, but now in your Amazon account, it's like I think Amazon does this on purpose, because if you unpublish a book, you can remove it from your account so you don't see it in the dashboard. If you pre-order a book and you don't hit it, Amazon leaves it there, and it's like deactivated, and you can't get rid of it. It stays in your account. Yeah, so for me, like I did that with one of my books, and so I have all these books, and then there's deactivated. It didn't hit the thing. It's like this mark of shame. You didn't get your book done in time. Yeah. So that's the one drawback of doing it. Just give yourself enough time to make sure that you're going to get the production at least done 2 weeks before you launch.
Sorry, say that again. So, because I thought I just understood you saying that you have to basically upload the book long before
You've got to have all the files uploaded about 7 to 10 days before the actual
gotcha.
go live
Gotcha.
date. It really depends on what you feel. For me, I always kind of like a 90-day window. I feel like 6 months is kind of like a big ask for a lot of people, saying, hey, my book's for pre-order. We're going to now 6 months. I think most people end up waiting until like the last 30 to 45 days before they go get something.
Got it.
Any other questions?
Raise your hand if you need to talk with Travis.
All right, who has their
Everybody.
stage book that they need help with? All right.
Yeah.
Who has a podcast that's got 40 episodes? There's book number 2.
Yeah.
Who does a lot of content online? All right, there's book number 3. So look, so this is my favorite story. There was a woman, she's an executive leadership coach, so runs a fantastic business, connected with her, and she's like, Travis, I've always wanted to write a book. I've been thinking about it for 7 years. I'm too busy. I don't have the time. Well, I found out that she was on the Forbes Leadership Council, and she had been publishing an article every single week for years. I had my VA go scrape all the articles. It was 350 pages. We just sent it to her, and I said, well, your book's done. You want some help publishing? And she's like, yeah, that'd be great. And we actually only used half of them. She ended up getting 2 books out of it. And the way she structured it, because you're like, well, there's not a through line to that, where she went, what's the biggest questions the leaders ask me? And then she just put like 25 articles that answered. The book was designed as like a user manual. And in the beginning, she said, this is not a traditional book that you read start to finish. This is a book that you go through the table of contents and go, I'm struggling with communication with my team. And you go to that chapter and get what you need from that. And that ended up being an eminently usable book for her audience. Again, we got to really think about what it's. My wife's book, this one I think is really funny. Like, that's not funny, but I just thought it was creative what she did. My wife does energy work, and she has a really hard time explaining what she does with energy work. She just created like 50 poems that talk about the energy work that she does, so that it's like a super playful. You can read it. This is what she does. That's, again, there's a million different things you can do for books. It's almost like, I feel like it's like agentic. What can we actually do with agentic? Like, I sit down now and everything I do, I'm like, how can this become a book? How can that become a book? Right, if you're speaking from stage, every time you're speaking from stage, like record that, because that can become either a chapter or go somewhere.
So amazing. Okay, and then we got to break for lunch.
Okay. So I'll just put it out there, and we can, as long as you're hanging around, we can answer it differently.
Gonna be here all week.
Try the veal. Fantastic. Tip your waiter. Sorry. So my question for you is this, so just super fast, is for 12 years I've been in the industry of sort of integrative and holistic medicine for people who have been diagnosed with cancer and either have an option no longer, or are exploring less painful ways to potentially treat that disease. So as we're going through, we have an event next week. We've got a micro-influencer. What? Yeah, so I'm going to record, it's part of it. So I'm going to record that, and that's a book that is like a tip-to-toe A to Z. How do you go from cancer to no cancer? And it's holistic healing even
Yep.
for you, like in time bounded. If you can't get the result, stop the madness, right? That's what conventional exists for.
Yeah.
So we can jump on those. I also wrote a book or a manuscript in it and published it. She's Worth Fighting For, A Husband's Guide to Her Cancer, that kind of recapped 12 years ago the experience that we had when my wife was diagnosed. So that's already been, and I didn't publish it for all the reasons that people do, because mostly fear, you don't want to be judged. So I have the upcoming event, and then we're launching a podcast called Fighting with Science, which is a bit of a play on words. And the podcast is interviewing the experts and really just talking about how science is actually on our side. We're fighting against policy using science
Yep.
to move the needle. So I wanted you to know a little bit of background, because I would love to hear, it doesn't have to be in this minute, but before you leave, how can I leverage those sort of assets? And then when you said the podcast, I was like,
Yeah,
I want to
and
write a book called
This is
Finance.
the beautiful thing. If you've got a podcast now, you're looking at, this is how I look at a podcast. If you're doing a podcast and you're doing episodes every week, every 6 months, you're releasing a new book, probably every quarter, depending on how long the conversations are. Here's the other thing for your space. This is the most beautiful thing about books that I love. You can't run ads a lot of times to holistic health. They won't let you do it. But you can run ads to a book, because it's First Amendment rights. I had a guy who was in the firearm space he was selling ghost guns. Yeah. Cannot advertise that anywhere. You know what we did? We created the Second Amendment Bible. 5 years of not being able to run Facebook ads. He put it on there. He put the ad up. First they told him no, and he said, that's a book, and I'm going to sue you for First Amendment. And they were like, yeah, we have to let him run. And now he's running ads at a high scale to the Second Amendment Bible, and guess what the first upsell is? Ghost guns, ghost gun, ghost gun, ghost gun, right? Financial stuff. You can't run anything on cryptocurrency or financial. You can't run any ads on YouTube or Facebook. You know what you can run ads to? My Guide to Cryptocurrency. Financial advisor's advice to his kids. How I taught my kids to be financially free by the time they're 23. Can't advertise that on YouTube, but you can't advertise it. I love books because of that. I started as a copywriter, started going into industries going, Kratom. You cannot run ads for Kratom anywhere. There's so many issues of Kratom. Do you know what we did? Created a whole series of guides around like anxiety, depression, low energy, men's sexual function, the stuff that all Kratom's been proven to do. And now he's got 5 funnels running to mini books. Then as soon as they get into the funnel, guess what? Oh, now you can offer your supplements. You can't advertise anywhere else. So again, this is just another really fun thing about books that you can do. Good old First Amendment. I love it.
Tomorrow I'll show you guys the book funnel.
And just one thing here, if you guys want to get it, I didn't run this by you, but I'm just making it up on the spot. So another thing that we can do, so like if you're doing a podcast book, right, it's just a bunch of different people chatting. If you guys want to have experience with this, I'll just make I don't know what we'll call it, the Titans book. Each one of you guys, I'll interview you guys for an hour about your particular topic, and we'll just put it together in a book, and I'll show you how that works. And I'll just publish it, and you can do whatever you want with it. There we go. Every 6 months, new group of Titans, new book.
Thank you, Travis. Give for Travis. Go.